I want to welcome Jeffrey Clayton, who's the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, to the program. Jeffrey, walk through with me what's happening with the protests and the bail issue related to those who do wind up arrested.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on.
Of course.
Generally, what we've seen, and I'll use Minneapolis as an example, is that most folks who are arrested are not being required to post bail. In the first week, 98.6% of people arrested, and there was only 170 people, if you can believe it, were released. Now, what's happened as a result of all the rioting is that these community bail funds have raised significant dollars, probably upwards of $100 million to now post bail for the protesters and pretty much anybody else who's going to have bail assigned to them.
And with that few number of people being arrested and bail not being required, that seems like a pretty big chunk of change to be sitting on for these groups.
It was, and I think it proved sort of the whole thing in the bail reform debate that there's not a bunch of poor people in jail that can't get out on low-level bonds that need to be posted. Mm-hmm. And that's what these bail funds have found out. And, you know, at least in the case of the Minnesota bail fund, you know, they went from posting bails of 1,000 or under to, you know, we think, and we have pretty good credible evidence that they posted bond for a guy who took pot shots at police.
Is anybody calling them out on this? I'm not seeing this in the mainstream media. Is there any illegality about collecting all of this money and then sitting on it? God knows how will it be dispersed in the end once this all stops, assuming it does.
It's their donors that are upset, and they feel like they've been sold a bill of goods. In other words, that there were peaceful protesters to bail out when, in fact, there weren't. There were only, in the first week in Minnesota, for example, there were 5 bails of less than $100 out of a total of 10 bails. And so It just wasn't there. And so I think that's the big concern, is that the purpose for which they sold the need just isn't there. And they can't, you know, what else are they going to use the money for? They can't really use it for anything else. So in my view, they should give some of it back.
You know, it's hard for me to imagine, even rewinding 3 weeks ago, now more than 3 weeks ago, that someone could have said to me, John, we need money to bail these poor innocent people out of jail, because from the very beginning here, it didn't look to me like there were mass arrests because people were walking in a park or in the street. There were mass arrests because of not just civil disobedience, I mean violence in the street. Have we gotten any details about who has actually been arrested? It's interesting. Jeffrey Clayton is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. And Jeffrey, I've asked the Richmond Police Department to come on the air and kind of articulate for us the data about who's been arrested. And, you know, I like the guys over there, but no one wants to come on the air and answer these questions. Do we know who's been arrested? Are these little old ladies who go to church every Sunday and feel like they're striking a blow against racism? Or are these anarchists who were kind of exploiting the situation?
They were exploiting the situation, or they were criminals and they were young. And at least in Minnesota, they were all charged with violent felonies, from homicide to arson to assault to a police officer. So the ones that were arrested and, you know, treated harshly actually did something. Mm-hmm. We can't find, you know, a single case of a nonviolent protester that had to pay, you know, that was one arrested hardly in low numbers in the first place, but then had to really post any bail above $100.
Yeah, gosh, I just don't see why anybody would want to bail out someone who looted a Target store or set a business on fire. What's going on in the head of an American citizen who says, "Oh, I need to intervene and try to help this person"? If anything, my instinct is I want them locked up, and I don't want them to have another day out on the street to hurt more innocent people. It's a really remarkable, awful, in my opinion, change that's happened in the country. Jeffrey Clayton, the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, I really appreciate the work you're doing and the chance to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.